The planet is suffocating in agony. Over 250 million souls have become pawns in bloody territorial disputes. More than 13,000 nuclear warheads, like the hounds of the apocalypse, are aimed at each other, ready to be unleashed at any moment to incinerate civilization. The economies of global giants are cracking under the pressure of an energy famine, and the specter of true starvation looms over 40 nations. But what if the key to salvation was left to us half a century ago? What if a man who predicted the greatest catastrophes of the 20th century with chilling accuracy left a roadmap out of today's crisis? Could it be that the prophet who infallibly foresaw the fall of empires and the fates of tyrants truly knew how humanity could avert its own self-destruction in 2026? It is time to open the final time capsule, laid by a genius whose abilities science could never explain. January 14, 2025, in a dusty secret vault, archaeologist-archivist Mikhail Voronov stumbles upon an unassuming metal box. A cold engraving on the lid reads, "To be opened strictly on January 14, 2025. Inside lies a wax-sealed envelope with a concise inscription, 'To the ruler of Russia.' Critically important instructions for the year 2026, W.G.M. These 3 letters needed no explanation. Wolf Gregorievich Messing, the most mysterious phenomenon of his era. A poor Polish Jew who became Joseph Stalin's personal oracle. A man whose gift was studied by academician Pavlov himself, who helplessly acknowledged it as a scientific fact. But how could he have foreseen the exact date his letter would be found? And could this be why Russia's global policy has suddenly become so unnervingly far-sighted, as if someone has peeked into tomorrow? To grasp the scale of this discovery, one must delve into the story of a man whose words continue to come true decades after his death. Wolf Messing was born on September 10, 1899, in the destitute Polish town of Gora Kalwaria. His family was so poor that bread was a luxury. His father traded cattle, his mother single-handedly raised 7 children, and it seemed the boy's fate was sealed. But on March 4, 1911, within the walls of the local synagogue, 11-year-old Wolf ceased to be an ordinary child forever. During a lesson, he suddenly began to describe objects that adults in the next room were silently thinking about. The local rabbi, thinking it was childish mischief, decided to test him immediately. He asked one of the most respected congregants to mentally picture any object from his home. The man focused, imagining his family's silver candlestick. On the second branch from the right, Wolf said quietly but clearly, "There is a fresh dent from a hammer blow." The man turned deathly pale. He had damaged the candlestick 3 days prior and had told absolutely no one about it. News of the boy who could read souls spread like wildfire. What this child demonstrates, the stunned rabbi wrote to his mentor in Warsaw, lies beyond human comprehension. I fear we have encountered either the greatest of gifts or something our minds cannot grasp. At 14, after his father's death, Messing made a desperate decision. Without money, without knowing the language, he secretly fled to Berlin, then the scientific center of Europe. The first months were hell. He starved, slept in freezing train stations, and was on the brink of death from exhaustion until he began to use his gift to survive. He would guess the thoughts of random passers-by for a few paltry pfennigs just to buy a piece of bread. Gradually, rumors of the young telepath reached academic circles. It was then that he crossed paths with Professor Max Abel, a renowned hypnosis researcher and a staunch skeptic who had debunked dozens of charlatans. In 1913, he attended one of Messing's street performances with a single goal, to unmask yet another fraud and publicly humiliate him. But what he witnessed shattered his scientific worldview to pieces. This event became the turning point, transforming a street boy into an object of intense study for the world's scientific community. The young man didn't just read minds. When the professor mentally gave him a complex math problem to multiply 1347 by 239, Wolf, without the slightest pause, gave the correct answer, 321,833. Abel was stunned. From that moment, he became Messing's first scientific curator, and the archives of the University of Berlin still hold the protocols of their hundreds of joint experiments. One of them defies imagination even today. Messing was placed in a completely soundproofed basement. Professor Abel was in his office on the 3rd floor, communicating only through coded light signals. He mentally transmitted a task to envision a red square with a blue circle inside it. After 17 seconds, Messing had precisely drawn the figure on paper, indicating the correct proportions. For the next 20 years, he was a true superstar. The best theaters in Europe sold out shows, newspaper headlines screaming the human X-ray and the Polish prophet. He found hidden objects, predicted the outcomes of horse races, and demonstrated miracles of telepathy. But the true worldwide fame that nearly cost him his life was still ahead. In April 1937, a meeting took place in Vienna that changed everything. Seated at one table were Wolf Messing, Albert Einstein, and Sigmund Freud. The 4-hour conversation turned into a rigorous scientific experiment under the observation of two of the era's greatest minds. Einstein's first task: find his pocket watch, which a servant had hidden somewhere in Baron Rothschild's vast mansion. Messing, with his eyes closed, walked silently through the rooms and unerringly pointed to a secret drawer in the library's desk. The watch was there. The second test was harder: to read the mind of the great physicist himself. Einstein concentrated on one of the most complex formulas of his theory of relativity. Messing silently took a pencil and wrote it on a sheet of paper, perfectly replicating even a minor calculation error the scientist had only noticed the day before. But the third task silenced even the skeptics. Einstein asked him to predict the future of Europe. Messing's answer sounded like a death sentence. In 2 years, the most terrible war in history will begin. Germany will attack my homeland. The war will last for 6 years and will end with Germany's defeat and the suicide of its leader in an underground bunker. It was the peaceful year of 1937. The predictions seemed like the ravings of a madman. Einstein later wrote to a colleague, "What I witnessed does not fit within the framework of modern science. This man demonstrates abilities that we will have to study for decades, if not centuries." The prophecy came true with blood-chilling accuracy. By that time, Messing himself was already a walking dead man. On November 28, 1939, while performing in a Warsaw theater, he made a fateful mistake. "What will happen to Hitler?" someone shouted from the audience. "Hitler will die if he goes to war in the East," Messing replied loudly, for the whole theater to hear. "He will meet his death in Russia. The Führer will kill himself in a bunker like a cornered rat." The hall erupted in applause, but Messing himself felt a chill run down his spine. He understood. He had just signed his own death warrant. The next day, black Gestapo cars were already rolling up to his house. Only a miracle saved him. Warned by a friend, he hadn't slept at home. The bounty on his head was colossal, 200,000 Reichsmarks. His face was on posters everywhere. He hid in the underground for months until Polish partisans, in exchange for predictions of German operations and ambushes, helped him escape across the border. On October 17, 1940, a man destined to become Stalin's secret weapon entered the Soviet Union under a false name. At first, as a refugee without documents, he was met only with suspicion and NKVD interrogations. But everything changed when one perceptive senior lieutenant recognized the legendary telepath in the prisoner and immediately reported to Moscow. The news reached the very top. On November 23, 1940, Wolf Messing entered the small Kremlin office to face the most distrustful man on the planet. Stalin decided to personally and cruelly test the guest's gift. The first task: to read his most private thoughts. The leader recalled an episode from his deep childhood, known to no one. As a 7-year-old boy, he was badly bitten by a ginger dog. "You are remembering a large, ginger dog," Messing said. "You were about 7 years old. The bite was on your left leg, just above the ankle. You were terrified, and your mother comforted you while cleaning the wound." Stalin, whose face was usually an impenetrable mask, visibly pale. The second test: to predict the immediate future. In 3 days, the ambassador from Berlin will report on Germany's military preparations. In 6 days, the People's Commissar of Defense will arrive with a report on the border situation. Everything came true, down to the hour. From that day, the most secret chapter of Messing's life began. Every Wednesday, a black government car would take him to the Kremlin for secret consultations. The protocols of their meetings formed the basis of a file codenamed Operation Cassandra. In December 1940, Messing delivered his main verdict: Germany will attack on June 22, 1941. At dawn, he predicted the 900-day siege of Leningrad, the unsuccessful assault on Moscow, and the turning point in the winter of 1942 near Stalingrad. But that wasn't enough for Stalin. He subjected the seer to new, more elaborate tests. The most famous was to obtain 100,000 rubles from the state bank using a blank piece of paper. Messing approached the cashier, handed him the empty form, and used the power of suggestion to make him see a check for the required amount. The stunned employee obediently handed over the money. The second test was even harder: to infiltrate Stalin's dacha in Kuntsevo by passing all cordons of elite security. Messing didn't become invisible. He simply made each guard see him as their direct superior, first Beria, then Molotov. They let him pass, saluting him. Stalin found the seer sitting calmly in his personal study, which finally convinced the leader of his power. With the start of the war, Messing's role became crucial. He predicted the failure of the German offensive near Moscow, named the exact start and end dates of the Battle of Stalingrad, and even foretold the day of the Allied landing in Normandy, June 6, 1944. But the most terrifying and important prophecy was yet to come. On May 7, 1945, one day before Germany's surrender, their final, fateful conversation took place. Stalin asked the question that tormented him most: what awaited the USSR after victory? Messing's answer sent the leader into a state of genuine shock. The Soviet Union will cease to exist in December 1991. It will happen peacefully. The country will break apart. And what will happen to me? Stalin asked hoarsely, disbelieving his ears. You will die in March 1953. Death will be sudden. In your office, all alone, all materials about this conversation and about Messing himself were immediately classified under the top secret, special importance stamp. After Stalin's death, which occurred exactly on schedule, Messing's era of influence came to an end. Nikita Khrushchev regarded him with skepticism and distrust. The seer understood that his time was passing. On November 8, 1974, 3 days before his own death, Messing wrote that final letter, the one that would only be found half a century later. In it, he described 3 possible scenarios, 3 paths for Russia's future. The first was the path of fire, a global escalation leading to a third world war and the nuclear self-annihilation of humanity. The second was the path of ice, a slow decline under the weight of sanctions, isolation, and the eventual loss of sovereignty, becoming a mere resource appendage. And the third path, the path of stars, this was the path of a revolutionary breakthrough. Messing indicated the exact date, time, and place: February 26, 2026 at 11:30 a.m. Moscow time, within the walls of Moscow State University. Russia would announce to the world the discovery of a new energy source, thousands of times more powerful than any known. This technology would instantly render nuclear weapons obsolete relics of the past and make resource wars meaningless. And today, we see strange echoes of this prophecy. Russian scientific institutes are conducting top-secret research in quantum physics. Western analysts and intelligence agencies are completely puzzled by the inexplicable foresight of Russia's political moves, as if the country is playing chess, seeing 10 moves ahead. In 165 days, on February 26, 2026, the world will hold its breath. We will find out if Wolf Messing was the greatest prophet in history or a brilliant mystifier. Will this day mark the birth of a new era for humanity, or just another date on the calendar? What's at stake now is not just the reputation of a man who died half a century ago. It is the fate of our civilization. His predictions about World War II, Stalin's death, and the collapse of the USSR came true with fatal accuracy. Now we stand on the threshold of his last, most important prophecy. Which path will Russia choose? The path of fire, which will burn the world to ashes. The path of ice, leading into cold oblivion. Or will it dare to tread the path of stars, opening a gateway to a future without wars and hatred for all of humanity? History does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And perhaps the man who could see through time truly left us the key to salvation. Very soon, before the eyes of the entire world, we will all learn the truth. The denouement is closer than ever.